Welcome to another episode of Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz. We have Dr. Joe Hamlett as our other co-host. How you doing, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing very good. We do this every week, but it's cool. Like you see, I got a big smile on my face because we get the opportunity to do our podcast, which has been the highlight of my week for many weeks now. So I'm doing excellent, man. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
That is great to hear. Most excellent as well. Always happy to be here talking with you and sharing our weekly discussions with our audience.
Right.
This week we are going to talk about, or this episode, we're going to talk about career transitions. Kind of a popular subject over the last couple of years, especially the last year, since we're kind of hopefully on the backside of COVID. But regardless of that, it's still very applicable to many people on a daily and weekly basis as it stands on its own two legs, you could say. So, so whether you're active duty, guard, reservist, military, transitioning to the civilian sector, whether you're in the regular corporate sector or industries, you know, IT, finance, hospitality, healthcare, what have you, and you're transitioning to another industry, because that never happens. It happens a lot. Whether it's, you know, transitioning from one position to another within your current company, whether you're transitioning in preparation to retire. At least one of us in this room, between Joe and I, has had the opportunity to feel that endeavor, if you will. Or maybe you're transitioning because it wasn't necessarily your choice. The ever popular layoffs or restructuring, reorgs, whatever you want to call it or refer to it. Again, you're the folks we're talking to. So really everybody.
Right.
So with that, transitioning your career from one position to another, career transitioning. So that can be a difficult topic to navigate, very challenging sometimes. Sometimes you're caught off guard. And that's not just from, let's say, being laid off or a reorg. That could be a promotion. Some people have been notified that they're being promoted and they didn't realize they were being promoted, such as it goes on, hey, Dave, by the way, pal, buddy, coworker, peer, we're going to give you Joe's job now that Joe has moved on. Oh, great. There's an opportunity to transition in your responsibility in your current position. So it doesn't mean that you have to leave or exit your position or your current position within a company. It could just mean transitioning to another level of responsibility. So with that basis in mind, we're going to start opening this door slowly and start letting that light shine through a little bit, if you will. So Dr. Joe, what would you like to say about career transitioning?
So you went down an interesting path on this one, because that's one position I can honestly say I have not been involved with, where somebody's come to me and said, hey, Joe, or Dave left, now you're going to take on his responsibility as far as in a positive light. That would definitely catch me off guard. But for me, especially this last 17 years or so, that's really, and actually I'll go back further, because we talk about career transitioning, and you mentioned the reorg, layoff and things like that. Throughout my entire working career, I have been involved in those types of events. And so I learned at a very young working age that you had to be ready for the next thing, always. And so I've always kind of kept my head on a swivel to be ready for those transitions, some more than others. But my life, especially my working career, has been that type of environment, and I'll even refer to it as kind of a forced resilience, because I have been forced to, be ready for those transitions. It's not a good place to be in, but it also shows you, how strong you are, and how well you are able to rebound in events like this. So the path that you took us down was, how would you prepare for, say, an event like you just talked about, where you're told, hey, you're taking on new responsibilities? And I'll take it back. I have been in similar situations, but it wasn't necessarily as a promotion thing. It was more a, you're going to gain more responsibility. Here you go.
Doing more
Uh,
with less. That's a
right,
popular
exactly.
statement.
But that was all part of the reorg type thing,
Mhm.
where, I absorbed some other areas. And for me, like I said, I'm always looking to improve, develop, and advance myself. So I'm always thinking with that open mindset that, this is not guaranteed. Tomorrow you could,
Yeah.
like I said in the past, or just previously stated, that I have been part of reorgs. I've been part of layoffs. I've been part of businesses that closed the doors. So my path or portfolio has always been ready to move to the next thing. So I take it as, just another opportunity that I have to prove myself, or that I have to be prepared to move into that next transition. And so I think I'm probably in better shape than most people, because I'm always anticipating, not a good place to be in, but it doubles as, sometimes it could be a good thing, because,
Yeah.
always expecting to be laid off or the shoe to drop. Like I say, that's not a good place to be in, but it is a space that is going to keep you prepared. So in
Yeah.
my case, I just always think that this position is not guaranteed tomorrow. So I'm always, like I said, keeping my credentials up to date, um, looking at other opportunities. Even if I'm in a so-called stable environment, I'm always still looking for ways to improve or to get better, or to always be looking, if it did come down to, say, they're going to lay off 1,000 people, uh, am I going to be marketable if I'm out there with the other 999 people? What's going to separate me from them? And so I always go into it, like I said, it's not a great feeling, but it is a feeling of preparedness, that I know whatever comes my way, I'm going to be able to um, effectively transition into that position. So kind of a long story, but at the same time, for me, I think I'm ready for most situations. I just keep my eyes and ears open, and sometimes predict where we're headed. And for me, that prediction allows me to start to focus on moving on, or being
Mhm.
prepared for that transition. So I may not have directly answered your question, but like I say, for me, I've always been prepared. I'm
Yeah.
always,
And that's what I wanted to pull out of your statements. You said two
okay.
words that really, really embody what career transitioning is, and that's preparation and opportunity. And keeping in mind, yeah, some of the situations are not comfortable to go through, and they can be very
Mhm.
uncomfortable if you're not prepared. But if we approach it as an opportunity for preparation and an opportunity to be prepared, it can become a positive thing, not necessarily enjoyable, but
Right.
positive. I'm going to go back to a story I was told by a client of mine several years ago. And the individual had said that they had worked for a company and were kind of blindsided and were terminated, and left that person in a very uncomfortable position. One, they didn't expect it. They had family responsibilities, bills, just like everybody, right?
Right.
But the positive side of that was the individual realized that it wasn't the end of the world. Was it challenging, and were there some struggles? Yeah. But within a few months, that person had found another position with another company, and it actually excelled in that position. So what appeared to be a big, blindside or caught out of nowhere type scenario, although it was actually a good thing because it was almost like a
Yep.
forced position to help them get themselves in a better position.
Right.
The company had realized that this wasn't a good fit. The individual was not in a position to step away voluntarily. They separated the individual, but within a couple of months, the individual was actually in a much better position than they would have been had they not been separated. So, turning a potentially negative scenario into a positive situation is where making a conscious effort to be prepared for those sorts of things is a good thing. You
Right.
said that you try to always be prepared for the next thing. And you and I are kind of in our own space right now together, where we are in a next phase, and that positioning is not necessarily a negative thing due to a change or a reorg or additional responsibilities. It's just that preparation to transition us to that next level within our
Yep.
current position. And that can be you work for a company, and maybe it's not a downsizing thing, maybe it's a delegation thing to where, and that'll be for another conversation, another podcast, where we distinguish between delegation and task assignment.
Right.
But where a person is provided the opportunity to take on additional responsibilities or an additional project to learn new skills to advance their career. Maybe it's not necessarily a promotion, but it's a skill advancement or an opportunity to learn something new. Or in the case of our military and veterans, how do you transition from one industry to another? I mean, and again, I say that specifically to provide a little focus on that because that's a very difficult transition. Or from one industry to another. Let's say you want to go from healthcare to tech, or tech to healthcare, from finance to engineering, or whatever, government to public sector, or
Right.
to corporate. Those are all different types of transition scenarios. The commonality is the preparation piece. If you're
Right. Yep.
prepared, that is going to make the transition, I'm not going to say painless, but less painful than it would be if you're not prepared. And you can prepare yourselves for involuntary separations or involuntary transfers into other departments or organizations. How do you do that? Again, it comes down to the self-awareness piece that we've talked about a lot,
Right.
about understanding what skills you bring, what your experience is, what your education is, what transferable skills do you have
Right.
that you can articulate to position yourself into either being prepared to moving into a different department or company, or into a different level of responsibility. And that's really the key thing that we want to focus on is career transition as an opportunity, as a preparatory opportunity versus an oh crap moment, you know.
Right.
And there
Right.
are going to be those moments where we're going to be like, oh crap, this is not what I wanted or expected. How do we make the best out of it? And the
Right.
answer to that is, how did you prepare for it? And if you didn't prepare for it, then that's your opportunity to learn from, to prepare for the next time. Hopefully there won't be a negative, scenario next time, but not everything is negative. It may appear that way out on the surface, but when you look at it, that layoff or that reorg or that transition to another industry, or from military to civilian, or one job to the next, is actually can be a very positive thing, once you look down the road a little bit, or using hindsight saying, oh, 3, 6, 8, 12 months ago, I was regretting that or didn't like it. But now
Right.
I actually
Yep.
realize this is not as bad as I thought it was going to be. So let's talk about things that we can do to prepare for transitions. Joe, how would you guide someone, or mentor, or coach someone, or help someone who might need some guidance for preparing for a transition of some sort?
And that's exactly it. It's the preparedness piece. So you mentioned it, transitioning out of the military into an industry. So what are some of the first things I need to do? So like you mentioned, um, taking a look at your skills and things you bring to the table, and then see how they transfer or translate to that position or positions you're considering. That's the first thing. Take a look at your current stock of capabilities. Then the next thing is looking at potential industries or places you want to go, and then doing some research. So you find a particular company that you want to work for, find out what the criteria is for you to work there. What type of skills do you need? What do you need a degree? Do you need certifications? So take a look at those industries that you're interested in and make sure that you have the skills to meet those requirements or minimum requirements. And then from there, start reaching out to those people. So say you're part of a network, say LinkedIn, for example. If there's people that are working in a particular industry or that are working at a particular company that you're interested in, maybe take a look at their profile, maybe take a look at or even reach out to them and find out kind of the organization, the culture, the way things work there. So a lot of it is, taking a look at what you have currently and then evaluating that against what you might need to get into that new position. Those are a couple of things that I would highly recommend or encourage. And then back to kind of things you talked about, if you're laid off abruptly or something along those lines, the same rules apply. See where you are today, what skills you bring, what skills you have, and see if they're transferable into another industry, another organization, or whatever you're, evaluating. But that's what is all part of it. And that's why I go back to the preparedness piece. You're not going to be able to, be prepared for every situation that may come your way, but being as prepared as you can will be helpful. And like Dave said, it's still going to be painful, but it might not be as painful if you've already have some of these things in place. And I'm not suggesting that people just always wait for that, other shoe to drop or things to just go off the rails. But there should be a sense of preparedness at any given time or situation. So like a lot of times when I'm coaching people, or mentoring people, preparing them for what's next. That's that scenario that I mentioned earlier about the 1,000 employees, all working at a XYZ organization or company. They lay off people, 1,000 people. So what's going to separate you from your peer now that you're all in the workforce or back in the job hunt? What's going to separate you from your peers? What's going to put you above them when you're all going to be applying for very similar positions, with organizations within the local community. So that's what I always encourage people to do. Look at your peers and then find a way to separate yourself. Like I say, it may not occur tomorrow or next week, but you can at least rest assured a little bit that you're, like I say, separating yourself from other people, the people that are potentially going to be your competition down the road if something was to happen. So those are the things that I recommend. Again, just evaluating your skill set, where you are. And it goes back to that self-reflection that we've talked about, and that constant evaluation of where you are. And then seeing how those are transferable to that new organization or that new industry or that new environment. It's all about you being, that one step ahead, not waiting for things just to fall in your lap,
Right.
and then have to react. It's more that preparedness,
taking ownership of your career.
Potential, things that could happen. Like I said, we don't want to go through life thinking, oh, tomorrow I could be laid off. I don't want people to have that, oh, woe is me, it's going to happen. But at the same time, you can't just sit back. Years ago when my dad worked for companies, he probably had the opportunity to work for, say, the same organization for 30, 40 years. But that's not the case anymore. Not many people get to, stay around in an organization for those extended periods of time. For the most part, most people are going to have 5, 6, 7 different jobs throughout their working careers. And so I encourage people to really think about that as they're thinking, hey, I'm going to retire from this location. That may not be the case. So just being mentally prepared, have your ducks in a row. Those types of things are going to help with that transition. Like Dave said, it may not eliminate that pain you're going to feel, but it'll definitely minimize some of that pain. And back to kind of the comments you're making about sometimes it's a benefit for some of these things to happen to you, because you may be in a rut, you may not be advancing, but you realize once you're forced to face maybe what's going on with you, that then you realize, wow, that wasn't really that good of a position or a good situation anyway. So it may open up new opportunities that you may not have ever
Absolutely.
taken or considered, because you
Mhm.
may have been comfortable and complacent about what the way things were. So
Yeah.
um,
And career transitioning can be a positive thing too. If you're putting in for a promotion, or maybe it's a move to a different department because you want to move to learn a different skill set, or one that better
right,
aligns with your skills and experience. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it still requires preparation.
right,
And there were two things that you mentioned that I think are really important for people to understand, our viewers and listeners to understand, is um, the transferable skills and the language that you use to
yeah, yeah,
articulate those skills. One of the challenges, one of the biggest challenges, especially for military folks, but also for people in the normal corporate or government entities, is transferring those job descriptions and job titles into something that's a little bit more universal.
yeah,
I remember a title, I'm not going to use the exact title I had early in my career, but something similar to it. We'll call it super duper team leader. And I'm like, well, what is a super duper team leader? Well, what it really was it was an assistant manager position. Well, in your resume, or when you're discussing your qualifications or your background, use that assistant manager title versus the super duper team person, so
right,
use common language, that or descriptions that are that are generic enough, that articulate more accurately what you are functioning as, or what your job was. that
right. And
will help that will help with that's one of the things that can help with the transferable skill piece.
well, and I was just gonna just reflect a little bit of back to what I was saying about researching
Mhm.
a potential organization. That's one of the things you do want to do. Make sure, like you said, that you're saying the same thing.
Mhm.
Because, like you said, you may be the super duper leader over here, but that equates to assistant manager. So that's part of that preparedness piece, is to make sure you are speaking the same language,
Yep.
and that goes back to doing that research on that potential organization or organizations similar to that you're trying to transition into.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, and let's touch for a moment on transferable skills. Everyone has transferable skills. Um, whether it's communication, because most of us talk or communicate in some way, shape, or form every day, whether it's verbal,
Right.
nonverbal, whether it's written, whether it's audio, whether it's visual. There's always some form of communication that we're involved in. So, think about that. And if that's an area that you need to work on or improve, what can you do to make that skill better? If you're really good at it, then articulate what that is. There was another company that another example, we'll just say this, another example is, um, like trainer, educator, facilitator, teacher. Those are all synonymous, but make sure you're choosing the correct words
Right.
in the way you're articulating your experience, because to some companies or some departments that are reviewing your qualifications and experience, they may not see the connection between facilitator and trainer, or facilitator
Right.
and educator. So make sure you make those connections. It may be that you do say, I'm a trainer slash educator slash facilitator slash teacher, or you may be able to come up with a generic phrase, or repurpose the phrases that are in those particular job requisitions that you're looking at. So,
Right.
and incorporate that into your resume, incorporate that into your verbiage and how you present yourself. And think about that when you're going from one industry to another, whether it's, again, military to civilian, whether it's corporate to private, whether it's, for profit to nonprofit, whether it's startup to mature company. A lot of companies have their own language that they
Right.
use,
Yep.
which is deliberate because they're trying to differentiate themselves or distinguish themselves from other companies. Put that different spin on it, make it a little bit more memorable, make it not so generic, maybe make it a little bit more exciting. Super duper, team person. That
Right.
sounds exciting versus assistant manager.
Right.
How boring
Right.
is that? It's boring, but it gets the
Right.
job done. So
Yep.
there are things to think about, when you're preparing. One of the other things that you need to kind of prepare for, and this can be a little bit more challenging for some folks, myself included in my past, when my positions weren't as ideal or as positive as they are now. I have had my struggles, but the financial piece, I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck, and it sucks, or even less than paycheck to paycheck. Always in that catch up mode. Do I choose between food or bills? Car payment or gas? In my car. Those are not comfortable situations to be in,
Right.
but you know thinking about how you can better that situation, as uncomfortable as it is a necessity in preparation. And maybe you can't do anything about it now, but just acknowledging that with yourself and being honest with yourself, having that honest conversation with yourself to say, what can I do to better position myself? Well, I can't do anything about this, but I can do something about this piece.
Right.
Well, then focus on the part that you can work on and just be conscious of that which you can't control. So, yeah, career transitioning doesn't have to be a bad or scary thing. And it's really not. It's more of an is what it is. And the more prepared you are, the more comfortable, I don't want to necessarily say easier, but the more comfortable that transition can be. And in some cases, in the case of a promotion or a person wanting to go to a new company or wanting a promotion or wanting more responsibility, then it becomes a positive thing. It doesn't make it any less easier or
Right. Right.
frustrating because you
Yep.
still need that preparation piece. To your point, research those companies, research the positions, research the industry, research the history and the trends going forward for that company
Right.
or for that job type. Think about these things. How does this translate to that? One of the things that used to frustrate me early in my career was, well, that experience doesn't count in this industry.
Right.
Well, it is a
Right.
transferable skill. It does count. So the question you then have to ask yourself is, if that company or that person or that department or that entity does not want to recognize this piece of experience as being equal to this piece of experience because they are equal, do you really want to work in that environment? And that's a tough question. There's no right answer. There may
Right.
be,
Right.
well, I don't like it, but I need to or I have to because it's a stepping stone. Or it may be, no, I'm not going to settle for that or accept that. Then you have to keep pressing forward and to find that good fit. So, in the last couple of minutes that we have, Joe, is there any final words that you'd like to share or communicate?
I just want to go back to the biggest part of this is the preparedness piece. I mean, you mentioned it, whether you're deciding to move on, whether you have been blindsided and you're laid off, the key is preparedness. And you just mentioned it when you talked about the last piece where you talked about, someone choosing to move into a different organization or choosing to move on or transition. But the thing you said was that if their qualifications don't match up to the new position they're looking for, you have a choice. You still always have that choice whether you accept it and go with it, or you say no, I'm not willing to accept that. And I think that's the other part of career positioning or transitioning that you really need to look at. That you look yourself in the mirror and say yes. This is either a stepping stone or no, I just can't do it. And that's part of that transition piece too, because, I've been in organizations where I've been asked, hey, we'd like you to do this. And I've had to say no, because again, it doesn't fit, say, my goals I've set for myself or the things I want to achieve. And so for me, it was my decision to say no. And maybe there are ramifications for that because you're not viewed as a team player or as a, somebody who wants to work in this organization long term. So just again, preparedness. And when you do have the chance, if you are transitioning, if you, are in a position where you have to make that decision, take those, like we keep saying, that self-reflection. Is it going to be something you're going to regret 6 months from now because you accepted a position that you didn't want? Or is it, a stepping stone? So keep all those things in mind when you're talking about transition, because, we all still control our own destiny, even if something blindsides you and says, hey, we no longer need you. And you are forced to go out and say, take a less desirable job that you wanted. So now your goal maybe becomes, how do I get out of this situation and get into a better situation? So it still really comes down to that preparedness, that self-awareness, and then setting those boundaries on things you will accept or not accept. It just, knowing where you want to go. It goes back to, the episode we did several podcasts ago about goal setting. Does it fit in that plan that you set for yourself? And this may be one of those things that you didn't plan for. So now you're gonna have to adjust that, that goal that you set or those objectives you set for yourself. But that's all part of it. That's all part of the journey. So yeah, just don't want to come off as saying that, everything ends, but in reality it does. And so, like David said, it may not eliminate it, but it can help with that transition by, being on top of as many things as you can in this process.
Yeah, and that's a great way to kind of recap. Think of it as tools in your toolbox or tools in your kitchen. If you have the right tools and you're prepared for, a variety of different scenarios, what tools can you use? If you don't have the correct tool, if you don't have that big hammer, what hammer do you have that will work? If you don't have the screwdriver or spatula that you really want, what is the one that will work? And that preparedness and that awareness is really crucial and key to having a positive transition in your career. Whether it's expected or unexpected, preparation is paramount. With that, we'll go ahead and close out for this episode. Thank you everyone for watching and listening to another podcast of Journeys of Not So Ordinary People. Until next time, have a great and wonderful day and keep on being your not so ordinary you.